Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of October the 8th. So join, watch this video, like it, share it, subscribe, and leave your comments below the video. I won't wasting your time. I won't be wasting your time. So let's move on and start overviewing what is going on today's Ukrainian front lines.
Let's start our review of the battle map using the deep state resource. What do we have and which directions would I like to discuss today, skipping those that are constantly mentioned, for example, Pokrovske, Boliman. Today I want to talk about two directions. These are the Kostiantinivka direction and the Novopavlivka-Velikomihailivka direction, which is the border area of Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, and Zaporizhzhia regions. In Kostiantinivka, we are clarifying yesterday's information about how the Russians attacked in this direction from the area of Novoyelenivka and Verbov Drugo. From Vodyan Drugo, they attacked toward Kostiantinivka, right along the highway, trying to break through straight to Kanstaka. Yesterday, I showed footage from the State Food Service Unit Phoenix. This is a drone systems unit that is part of the group's forces, more precisely the drone systems forces. Now, here is footage from the 93rd Brigade, which also took part in repelling this attack. So in total, it wasn't just Phoenix and the 93rd involved, but also the Lazarai, which is a special unit of the 27th Pechersk Brigade. The Lazarai are currently keeping a low profile, so to speak, and only limited public information is available about them. Here as well were units from the 156th Brigade, Azov, Omega Wing, the 109th Brigade. All of them were holding back this enemy onslaught. Now it's becoming a bit clearer to him why, over the course of 2 consecutive days, the occupiers suffered such significant losses in equipment, specifically in armored fighting vehicles and tanks. It's very uncharacteristic for the current battlefield to rely on a breakthrough by mechanized units, but right here in the Kostiantinivka direction, the enemy tried to take advantage of the weather conditions, hoping they wouldn't come under attack from our pilots, because objectively speaking, that was expected. Honestly, admitting drones are not exactly powerless in truly bad weather conditions, but they are much, much less effective. And this is precisely what the Russians might be counting on in their upcoming anticipated assaults. It's abundantly clear that in autumn, especially late autumn, bad weather and dense fog are all undeniable signs of the natural state of things we're observing. However, even despite the worsening, increasingly challenging weather, the Russians, even though they valiantly tried to break through our well-defended positions with their tanks fitted with welded grills and other monstrous, intimidating add-ons, were ultimately unable to achieve this significant breakthrough. Most likely, I might make what some would call a premature conclusion, but armored combat vehicles, well, it's not that it's completely obsolete, but it has almost no chance of any success, especially if we're talking about forming some kind of armored fist. Even then, they have almost no chance of breaking through. I'll just remind you of the words of Madjar, which he once said at one of the security conferences. I'll quote him verbatim: "There is no such tank that a Ukrainian FPV drone couldn't hit." So it's unlikely that the enemy, frankly speaking, has any chances. According to the results of last month, according to the results of September, Russian activity on the front has somewhat decreased, and the number of assaults they carry out is directly proportional to the decrease in their personnel losses. But, in fact, I'll even say this: it might actually be a better scenario for our troops if the Russians switch from assaulting in small groups to launching more massive mechanized armored attacks. Because as of today, that would actually be much easier. Even you could put it that way. Much easier targets exist on the front line. However, despite the fact that the enemy has not broken through in this section of the front, just recently, according to Deep State, there were indications of enemy advances in the area of Bilahora. This means a kind of pincer movement from Andriivka westward towards Stupochki and Pritekina. These are the positions that the occupiers have long tried to push through here in open fields and on high ground. In principle, at this point, the context of geographic and landscape elevations no longer plays such a decisive role, but here, objectively, due to their greater number of personnel and the larger amount of resources they can afford to expend, they managed to make this advance. However, if we talk about advances and attempts to use, among other things, weather conditions, the worst situation for us continues to develop at the border of Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. Right now, in the Huliaipol direction, you could even specify the area of Poltavka, Olhivska, and Malinivka. Here, unfortunately, the Russians are advancing. We have a problem here with one of the brigades whose positions are under this pressure. We won't specify the exact number of the brigade because for now at least it would probably be inappropriate. But I do know that rapid response forces have now been deployed here to prevent any further advance. Because, by the way, I have also repeatedly said that this movement of the enemy towards in the Veliko-Mikhailivka direction, specifically in this section of the front, it could result in the Russians threatening our rear, advancing into our rear from the settlement of Hulyapol in the Zaporizhzhia region. Recently, Malinivka has been lost. Olhivsky was lost a long time ago. Poltavka is, so to speak, on the verge. And beyond that, there is a large stretch of open field where apparently there are no well-fortified positions, almost all the way to Hulyapol. This can't be called a major breakthrough by enemy forces, but it is undoubtedly and unequivocally a danger that must be taken into account. The problems on our Novopavlivka front began quite some time ago. Ever since, in the area of Vuhledar and Velika Novosilka, especially Velika Novosilka, right here in the Shakhtarsk and Zolota Niva area, the Russians, in a rather astonishing way, simply broke through along the road to. They advanced almost 10 kilometers, well, it seems about 7 kilometers, simply along the road. And for some reason, at that time, there were not even any fortifications there to meet them, not even remotely laid mines or other defensive measures. And since then, this enemy movement has persisted and is expanding in the Veliko-Mikhailivka, or rather now Hulyapilsky direction. I'm not even sure what to call it. Unfortunately, our problems here are still not being resolved for some reason. Yes, although there were successful counteroffensive actions here. In particular, you can see this striped section of the front near Sosnivka. But Sosnivka alone is not enough, so to speak, because to the north of Sosnivka, there is the settlement of Novoselivka, where we also carried out counteroffensive actions. However, the situation in Novoselivka now is extremely difficult. The 31st Mechanized Brigade is showing how it keeps pushing the enemy out. Here is one of the episodes. A video was published on the Deep State resource. And you can see how the soldiers of the 31st Brigade are driving the enemy out of their positions near Novoselivka using drones. There is footage showing how they are directly tracking the enemy in Novoselivka itself. The Russians have entered this village more than once already. Although Novoselivka is ours, it falls within the so-called kill zone of our troops, a kill zone to be precise for the occupiers created by our forces. But unfortunately, it should be noted that infantry regularly enters the settlement from the east. As I already mentioned, this is far from the first time the enemy has been spotted directly in the village. That is why on the deep state map, there is quite a wide gray zone here, which shows that the position in Novoselivka, which is north of Sosnove, well, you can see it all the way to the Vovcha River, is actually still a gray zone with the enemy constantly appearing there. Here are other shots from the 31st Mechanized Brigade, which is defending this area. In some buildings, they are hunting down the remaining occupiers with explosive drones. Our soldiers are eliminating them, as they say, reducing their presence to zero. Enemy infantry are running across, taking cover in the next set of ruins and debris, where once again our drone comes flying in. In fact, this scene that I am showing right now, the relentless 24/7 hunting, tracking down enemy troops hiding in various holes, is a sign of the difficult situation that has developed for our forces in the Kupiansk direction, something I have spoken about many times before, including by criticizing the statements of the General Staff spokespersons who said that, well, there's nothing to worry about. At least that was the emphasis felt in those words, that it's nothing serious, that the enemy advanced not to the center of Kupiansk, I'm referring to the Kupiansk direction now, but only on the northern outskirts. Here's a concrete example. Novoselivka and the Veliko-Mikhailivka direction, where the enemy also hasn't advanced deep into the village or to its western outskirts, but they are present in the village, and the very fact of their presence already shows that tracking them down is very difficult. This is clearly visible from the previously published photos. The general trend of movement, if we look further south in this direction, as I've already mentioned, is quite clearly visualized by the obvious story of movement toward the rear of Hulyapol from the Zaporizhzhia region. But here, on the
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
In the Dnipropetrovsk, I'm not sure of the exact name, Veliko-Mikhailivka direction or the Novopavlivka direction. Here, the enemy's objective is to advance toward the settlement of Pokrovska. This is a village located on the highway between Donetsk, Kurakhove, and Zaporizhzhia. This is the highway along which the enemy has not been able to advance from the east for a long time, but as you can see, they're making a big detour, a wide circle toward Pokrovsk, and unfortunately, we have to say that they are having some successes. Verbov, although the 110th Mechanized Brigade stated just last week that supposedly Verbov is not occupied by the enemy, but now those same deep state analysts have already shown footage from Oleksivka. And as you can see, there is a very wide gray zone there, just like in Oleksivka. Although, to be honest, I drew the line incorrectly, not from the direction of Verbov, but from the area of Sosnivka. Here in Oleksivka, enemy assault groups have already started to appear, but they are not frequent. There aren't many of them, to be honest. These are literally isolated infantrymen, 4 men, as you can see in this geolocated photo, let's call it that. But unfortunately, they are here. I repeat, for now, this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean the settlement is occupied, but the situation here, to put it simply, is volatile. Although, in fact, there have recently been some successful counteroffensive battles here. Now, friends, in this review, in today's one, I want to place a certain emphasis on that victorious aspect. The information that was made public the day before about the Tomahawk missiles, regarding which supposedly Trump has made or is very close to making a positive decision in our favor. What did the American president say the day before? Let me break down this topic now, having looked into it, and give my summary. I am rather skeptical about the likelihood of Ukraine receiving these American-made cruise missiles, which are very precise and, in fact, the flagship missiles in the Tomahawk cruise missile family. Why? Let's figure it out. So, US President Donald Trump stated last night that they are close to sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He noted that before making a final decision, he would like to know exactly what these missiles will be used for. And in my opinion, this is also a sign of such verbal acrobatics, which shows that Trump simply said something once again, as usual. Well, you know, it's outrageous for an American president, but he often seems to have a generator for random phrases and words just spouting off whatever comes to mind. Today, for him, Zelensky is a dictator. Tomorrow, he's basically a decent guy. And the day after tomorrow, he's the leader of a country they sympathize with, a country waging an incredibly determined fight for its independence. In other words, nothing stops the American president from changing his mind on any given day. He can simply say that he didn't mean anything at all, that he didn't say anything at all. That's the first point worth making. The second point is, I think that this statement is not so much directed at us, Ukrainians, or meant for us, as it is rather aimed at the Russians. It's an attempt to test their reaction. What will Putin say? What will Medvedev write? What actions will they take on the front? Will there be escalatory strikes like in the past, for example, on Ukrainian energy infrastructure or on Kyiv? That's why Trump is making these statements. That's the purpose behind all of it, about Tomahawk missiles. So, in my opinion, their main target audience is Russia. And only after seeing Russia's reaction will we look at the response of the American president. Although, I repeat, my forecast is still not optimistic, even if Russia's reaction continues to be somehow inadequate. Tomahawks are not expected for us in the medium-term perspective, definitely not, in my opinion. Why? Because we simply have nothing to launch them with. I dug a little into the question of whether we could launch these Tomahawk missiles with anything, because they're not just ordinary missiles. In order for the missiles to work effectively, besides the missiles and launchers, you also need a large infrastructure. That's basically the main issue. But, well, anyway. Oh, by the way, Trump is also in a kind of disgrace now. I'll say this, I wouldn't be surprised if in the end it turns out that when he was telling journalists about Tomahawk missiles and supposedly making such a positive forecast for Ukraine, he actually meant other missiles, Barracuda missiles, which have only recently started being mass-produced in Taiwan, by the way. I wouldn't rule out that Trump just doesn't care, honestly. Tomahawks, Barracudas, JASSMs, or some other missiles, they're all big, long, and thick. So basically, what's the difference what he's going to send over there? But anyway, getting back to the Typhoons, I don't really believe that we actually have such an option, because the main platform for launching Typhoons is either missile destroyers or submarines. Tell me, please, has anyone seen any news about the US being ready to give us missile destroyers? Do we believe in that? No. I definitely don't believe it, and I don't think that's a possible reality. I've written about all this in more detail on my Telegram channel. I encourage you, friends, to join it. Here you can see on the screen how to find my Telegram channel in the search bar of this social network. @Pekhno_news. Or there's a direct link to the Telegram community in the description of this video. My personal blog is Pekhno, so join it and read the latest analytics there more frequently and promptly. So missile corvettes, submarines, no. Also, among the platforms for launching Tomahawks, there is the mobile launcher Typhoon, not Neptune. Let me show you what it looks like. Oh my goodness, Neptune, Typhoon, Typhoon, what Typhoon looks like. So here it is. This is a modern missile system with 2 missiles. These are the launch silos which move on land. These launches are very new, very modern. They were only put into service in 2023. And since then, so far, only 2 units in the United States Marine Corps have these systems. So once again, I have a question just like about the missile destroyers or submarines. Do we really believe that the Americans could give us modern Typhoon launchers, of which they basically only have enough for 2 units? I don't believe it. Do you believe it? You can write in the comments, but I think you are all just as smart and aware. The only purely theoretical option, which the Ukrainian analytical publication Defense Express writes about, is this one. This is for one missile launcher called Long Range Fires, or LRF, is a vehicle that was in service with the US Marine Corps. And literally a month ago, the Americans decided to abandon these launchers because the reason is their low maneuverability, as they don't perform well on soft ground or sand, since these launchers were supposed to be landed by the Marines on the shore. The wheels get stuck, bogged down, and they become barely mobile. And for the Marines, this is a critical quality, a key characteristic. That's why they're not suitable for them, but for us, they would be perfect. However, again, there are big questions and doubts. How many of these systems do the Americans actually have? Do they need to be modernized? Can we get them? Will they give us a sufficient number of rockets and launchers? Because this is quite an expensive story. The rockets themselves are costly and their production is rather limited and produced in small quantities, so we can't really count on getting many of them. That's why today, I'm going to lower the tone of victory a bit and urge you to prepare for the possibility that we might not receive anything at all, and tomorrow Trump's rhetoric could change completely. And if we do get them, well, let it be a pleasant surprise for us. And for me, it would be a nice gift if you, my friends, would give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to us. All the best, stay healthy, and see you next time.